Sounds good.
Hey everyone, I am here today with John. John is the best Dragon Ball Super card game Masters player in Australia, and also just recently got top 8 at the Fusion World Regional we had, and we're going to be doing a tier list today. So, John, how are you going?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Yeah, thanks for the compliments, about my master skills. Yeah, it's nice, it's been interesting though with Fusion World now. Obviously, it's technically a different card game, even though it's like the same idea, whatever, and like similar mechanics. So it's good to see, like, even you, I know you got top 16 at the event as well. It's good to see that a lot of the Masters players like their skills transitioning over. So yeah, no, it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah, definitely good. I think we had two other Masters players who made top 4, being Dean and Ryan. So it's definitely good to see that we're still doing good. Masters players are still holding strong, but let's get right into the tier list. Um, I was gonna go left to right, go starter decks into set one, but let's get the obvious out of the way. I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like this should just start there, so we kind of have a benchmark of what we're comparing all the decks to. I think you can agree, John, that Top Coup is the new big bad of the format.
Yeah, it's like not only is it the big bad of the format, it's like it's clearly the best deck. Like I know in set one, obviously there was like for me anyway, like I know it kind of leaned towards Broly being like the best deck at the end of set one, right? But like overall, like there was arguments too made for Frieza and Gohan as well. And even at the very start of the meta, like everyone was saying Ginyu was the best deck, right? But that kind of fell off once everyone figured it out, right? So I don't think Crimson will fall in the same category as Ginyu, where or top tiers, whatever you want to call it, right? But I don't think it will fall into the same category because the deck is just like, yeah, you can just feel how oppressive the deck is when you verse it, and just red in general is like so good in set two. So yeah, that is the benchmark. That is the best deck in the game. It's like that's kind of not up for debate, but yeah, we'll just see how the meta evolves around it, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess kind of going into it, it's going to be a similar thing as to kind of how we perceive decks in set one. A deck can still be super strong. For example, like Green Gohan and Green Broly, which we'll get to at some point. Those decks are still super strong into everything that's not this kind of like TOP red kind of like styled deck. So obviously, tier list is going to kind of revolve around what the S tier deck is. So let's get right into it with Starter Coup. Um, I'm going to reserve A tier for a very few select decks. So I'm going to say Starter Coup is B tier. Do you agree with me, John?
Yeah, I agree with you. Like Stardew weird. Like I know a lot of people in set one were saying, "Oh, Stardew's kind of slept on yada yada yada." Right, with the new the promo, the one that's like the Goku to drop that becomes 25K when you awaken, then combined with your leader, it'll be 30K on both playstones, which like that's cool, but it's like it's not really that crazy if you think about it. It's like it is overstated, sure, but it doesn't do enough. And kind of like I think yeah, I think the Stardew is just always going to be okay. Like I don't think it'll ever be bad, but like it has to be in B on the tier list because I don't think it's like A tier. It's definitely not the second best red deck in my opinion, and it's arguably not even the third. But it's like it's red, so it's going to be just pushed up the tier list automatically because you can just play all the good red cards and the deck will just perform fine. Just carried off the back of like literally Kepler. So
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of in a similar spot to all black decks at the moment in One Piece, where everything's just kind of carried off the back of Gecko. This Starter Coup deck is just it can run Kefla, so it's obviously going to be up there. Moving on to the next deck, Vegeta, Starter deck Vegeta. Um, I'm gonna let John. I'm gonna let you place this one because this is definitely a deck that you're more familiar with than I am. But I do think it's up there in terms of blue decks, but where it sits, I'm gonna let you decide that one, John.
man, it's so nice. Look, I personally think Vegeta's A tier. I think I thought the set one, I was actually tempted to play Vegeta for the Brisbane regional. I ended up getting top five in, but I couldn't figure out the yellow matchup for the life of me. And that led me to not play because it does so well into green, right? Just like you can just be super green leaders base 35K. And in this set, we actually got like a bunch of decent support, and even this leader specifically got like cards printed just for the leader. And even in my testing as well, it's like I'd argue it's one of the few decks in the game that can go toe to toe with top two. Granted, like you give up some other matchups for the like positive matchup into top crew. But it's like it kind of like the fact that you're able to go toe to toe with the best deck. I think that just like speaks volumes to how good it is. And arguably best blue leader in the game. Like, yeah, that's just what I think on Vegeta anyway. So,
Yeah, I
like,
definitely
35k base is, yeah, there you go, you go.
Yeah, I definitely think Vegeta is takes the crown kind of best blue leader in this set at least, just because being that, as you said, that 35k base, applying pressure into Top Ku's leader once it's awakened, and even pre-awakening applying pressure into board is probably two of the like things that we're going to value the most into in this format, just because Top Ku's obviously going to be a little bit lax on the defense sometimes because it awakens at 3, as well as it having to discard a card for its leader effect. So it can definitely suffer there. So being able to have that little pressure that we have with that leader being a 35k will definitely get it far, as well as I don't think anyone will underestimate the 3-drop blue Vegeta we got in this set. That card is cooked. Super good at
Yeah.
combating red, super good at combating yellow. It's terrible against green, dog awful against green.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but besides that, I think Vegeta's definitely probably in the spot of the best blue deck.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree to that. Well, yeah, I do agree with my point, yeah. So thank you for agreeing with my point.
You agree with yourself. Congratulations, John. Moving on to Frieza. Um, I think Yellow's kind of in this like relatively awkward spot in set 2 where you've got this really cool new Vegeta card which says your cards can't be KO'd, but playing into red, your cards aren't going to be KO'd. They're going to be negged. And you kind of Yellow was the deck that wanted to swing and apply pressure, and people were stalling against Yellow last set. But now we have to stall against TOP because its Awakened side is just better than any of the Yellow leaders' Awakened sides. So it's kind of in this awkward spot where it wants to do the same thing that TOP did, but it's just worse.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to summarize it.
So
Like,
for me, it's kind of sitting in this B tier in terms of the traditional sense, what we saw in Frieza last turn, kind of being that mid-range aggro deck. But there could potentially be people who build it a bit differently, and it may go up. But for me, it's sitting at B tier at the moment.
yeah, it's interesting, right? Because like you said, yeah, that Vegeta card is very good, and also the thing that's a bit weird though is that for that 3-drop Vegeta specifically, it's kind of counterintuitive to the Frieza deck because its permanent only gives your rest of the cards protection. So with the Frieza restanding your battle cards, at the end of the turn, right, it's like, oh, you're kind of like losing some of that protection, but that's only really matters versus green and the mirror, right? Like that card, that Vegeta is just useless into red, right? But the cards that yellow got this set make its matchup into green significantly better. I think there's a case that it's hard because I think Frieza is still probably the best yellow deck. Um, but it's hard to put in A tier. I think if it's in B tier, I think that's to be at the top of the B tier or the bottom of A tier. I think it's somewhere between there.
Yeah, I definitely think we're gonna have a lot of decks sitting in B tier, at least in my mind, in this tier list, because we're gonna have a lot of decks that are good that just have like kind of one or two flaws. And to me, that's kind of where Frieza sits. So I think top of B tier is probably accurate for it. I do think, yeah, having the 4-drop cooler and being able to restand that is definitely super effective against TOP. Just being able to they play the Kefla and then they swing and then you block and then you rest whichever one they didn't swing with is always going to be super strong. So definitely it has
Yeah,
has a lot of potential, but I don't think it can be played the same way it was played last set. So I definitely think there's a lot of cool deck building that we can do with Frieza to kind of get it to its true potential.
yeah, I agree. I just think it's kind of funny that it's like in set one, Frieza like loved to verse like green decks besides Broly obviously kind of beat the rest of the meta. But now it's kind of the other way around. Now like it's just weird, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely is. Moving on to the deck you just mentioned, Broly. Um, to me, Broly's one of those decks. It was S tier last set, but I think Broly's gonna fall the most in this set.
You reckon, you reckon Broly's gonna fall the most?
I think Broly is the deck that goes from being. I think Broly has fallen the most. Whether that's still, I still think it's B tier. I don't think Broly's in the A tier. Um, that's just me though. I could be on a lot of copium. I just think Red has too many 25k bodies now. As you got Android, you have Kefla's 25k once awakened, Gohan's 25k, Goku's still 25k. So I don't think the plus 5k from the leader gives you as much value as it used to, as well as I don't think we can really afford to crit that life and not have the draw on the awakened side. So to me, Broly's down in B tier. B tier may become too big. I think B tier is just me being a little bitch and not wanting to say deck C tier. But I think Broly's kind of down here in terms of TOP is going to be the best deck. I don't think Broly's going to have a good time into that matchup. I think Broly will still have a good time into all the other decks, but I think we kind of got to look at it in terms of kind of where it sits in TOP and how that kind of shifts and forms the meta.
Yeah, look, I do agree. Like TOP spits out a bunch of 25k bodies and also makes the leader 25k itself, right? So that just naturally, your deck naturally just has like, doesn't lose to the Broly's like biggest boss side, right? Where in set one, a lot of the aggressive decks were just spitting out 20ks, right? Whereas like, that Broly naturally defends itself, right? Granted, we didn't get Senzu being this set, but like realistically speaking, it's like two energy for Senzu being to give your leader another 5k pump
It's pretty
is
bad.
pretty taxing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty taxing. It's like look, I think there is a world where somebody because technically like we've got a lot of interesting cards that makes it like curve a little bit like not its curve but its top end like a little bit closer, if that makes sense. Like using the 5-drop cell and then also potentially a 3-drop trunks. Like realistically speaking, instead of running stuff like Turtles or Goku, right? The 5-drop Goku that replaces your energy when it's popped, you can play that 3-drop trunks, and that only costs 3 energy to ramp you, right? And so that will be the two energy up for Senzu Bean, but I don't really see that being like the optimal way to play green. And then yeah, like losing a life on Awaken, like it was yeah. I think top crew is just being 25k and not mitigated by Broly's upside does hurt it a lot. And I think it's probably not going to be as good as Cell or Gohan. So I think Beat is fine for it for now.
Yeah, I think B tier and even like I think there's a small chance it drops down to C tier because Broly was the deck that kind of yellow quote unquote feared. So Broly was theoretically able to swing into yellow's leader and draw a card and not really worry too much about the awaken side. But now Broly not being able to swing into TOP because it will awaken too fast and apply too much pressure, as well as not drawing on the unawakened side, I think it's really gonna suffer, especially in that matchup. But moving
Yeah,
on,
I was
you go
yeah,
for it.
yeah, I was gonna say I did one of the like I love the Japanese players in Dragon in Fusion World, right? Because they always make there's a lot of Japanese content out there, and like everyone I've talked to knows that my Twitter is literally like all half Japanese, English, because I'm following a lot of Japanese players and whatever, right? And I remember I watched a video from Japan. They were testing the top crew in the Broly, and it was one of the most one-sided gameplay I've seen. So I was like, that was fun to watch because I'm not a big fan of the Broly deck. But it was just fun. It was just crazy to see how like insane the Goku deck was into Broly. Like they couldn't do anything about it, honestly.
Yeah, no, definitely great. Moving on to the set leaders, we start off with Zoroku. To me, Zoroku does not reach the A tier status. I do think it's close. I think it's kind of sitting at the top of B tier. Would you like to make an argument for it being A tier, or do you agree that it's kind of sitting in this B tier at the moment?
No, that's the city beats is like Zoroku and Stardoku are kind of like the bottom of the red list, right? Like which isn't it's just really like that surprising considering how good the best deck is a red deck, right?
Yeah.
But I will say I do think that Zoroku is the most interesting of the red decks because it's the most unique actually, right? Because that the reason you play the Zoroku leader is so you can run Tien Shin Han that's a one drop 20k. And now you also there's a new card in the set, the Frieza one drop, which is it will be a one drop 25k in the deck. So I think that's like people will experiment with Zoroku for that angle because that's like honestly one energy for a 25k body is huge. You can like potentially play two or three Friezas in a single turn. That's a lot of pressure you're applying without any real downside, right? Like the downside of the top three leader to play these bodies for cheap, right? You have to discard a card from your hand, and that can be detrimental. But the fact that Zoroku doesn't have that downside also gets to awaken up full life. I think there's a real potential that like when Zoroku gets figured out a little bit more, maybe it jumps up to A tier. But I think for now, I think it's comfortable in B tier.
Yep, I think that's pretty much the perfect argument for it. Then obviously Zoroku probably has the most high roll play in the game, which is pay 4 energy for a Kefla. Kefla then plays the new 3 cost TN, which then plays 3 1 cost TNs. So for 4 energy, you're getting 5 bodies on the board. Um, it's a bit
Yeah,
disgusting.
that'll be the wet dream. That'll be the wet dream play.
That'll
But
be the wet
obviously, you
dream.
can't.
But it's
Yeah, you
probably
can't force them to play. Yeah, you can't force every game. There's no way.
yeah, nah, probably can't happen all too often. Moving on to what I consider is the next A tier deck, and I'm gonna shove it right in front of your Vegeta, because I be like that. I think Beerus
Oh,
is the second best red deck and definitely one of the top decks in the format.
yeah, no,
Uh,
I agree with that too. I'd also make the argument that like I think Goku is the clear number one deck in the game, and I think Beerus not clear, but I think I would argue that Beerus is the second best red deck in the game. And I think the biggest like pull for Beerus is like, funnily enough, it's actually that frontside critical. This is like in the previous set, obviously. Like leaders such as Goku, Black, and Cooler, right? They struggled a lot with that crit leader, right? That crit front side. Whereas Beerus kind of didn't mind because Red naturally has so many self awakeners, and it didn't change in this set. I think like what in most red decks you have like close to 20 cards that take your own life, and the main one, the MVP, is literally the Roshi, right? But now that Beerus got the Khalifa 2 drop, right? That's a 2 energy 25k, sorry, 20k crit that also takes a life. Like there's so many times where like my partner loves playing Beerus, right? I was like helping her like show her the new cards and whatever. And the amount of times where it's like you play Beerus, like you're going first or second, right? Turn one, you do whatever. Turn two, you can play Khalifa, and then you have 220k critical swings on board. Or even if you're going second, right? It's fine to blow your energy marker to play the Khalifa. Like, sure, it sucks you blowing early game, but then you have this 20k, 220k crit bodies on board, and it's like so many times seeing that they can actually just crit stomp your life, which is ridiculous, right? And then you get to the backside, and like you crippled your opponent, and Beerus has the best removal in the game, and that's kind of relevant when Android 17 in red can't be KO'd by skill. So the fact that you can comfortably remove it to 0 in Beerus and KO that, I'll get rid of that card is just huge in their map. So yeah, I think Beerus will slot in nicely into the yeah, top of A tier, second best deck in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think you've pretty much spoken to all the key points. Just it has a great time removing uh top crew's board. I think the other part is just with it being a crit leader, playing into the matchups where you're trying to stall your opponent out. Being a 20k leader means you can swing into their body, and I think that's a super underrated situation. For example, top crew, they'll play down their hit. Being able to swing 20k with your leader into their hit just means they lose a card in hand. Like the amount of value that generates, it doesn't sound like much, but that happens once or twice, right? Because they're not going to be able to awaken super early. You'll be able to get a lot of advantage in the long run. So definitely, I love having Beerus out here in A tier. Moving on to
Yeah, I agree.
Trunks. This is Nick's favorite deck. Uh,
It is my favorite deck.
he loves Trunks. Because I'm petty, I kind of want to put a D tier just to kind of tell him he sucks. But I don't think Trunks has kind of like is kind of in this like really weird spot where it's not as good as Vegeta in terms of a blue deck because the Activate main, while it's still good, isn't that good. I don't think it's too far below everything else. I think it's one of those decks that if we were to put it at the end of B tier, not too many people won't complain. I think it's got with Vegito specifically, the Vegito being able to reduce costs, so we can actually bounce a 4 or less now with Trunks' leader effect to our opponent's hand. It's pretty good into a lot of different things. I just think Trunks doesn't have a green matchup, which is still something that's a bit scary.
Look, for me, I think it's hard to push Trunks above C tier in my opinion. Like
I tried,
the
Nick.
leader.
Nick, I tried.
Nah. No, it's like the concept of lead is really cool, right? It's like technically, like in one game, you get so much value, right? You can bounce your own cards, replay them, whatever, right? Which is really good in theory, but in practice, the problem with Trunks and I guess blue as a color in general, it doesn't really have any closing power, right? That's why the Vegeta lead is so good. The fact that your win condition is your leader, like getting your opponents that likes that shot where your leader can just get a massive swing to close out a game. No other blue deck provides that. Neither, but like especially Trunks, right? Like it's cool that you can play this really long game, but you don't have a card that says I can win this really long game. You're kind of just hoping your opponent runs out of things to do. And yeah, okay, some decks sure you can slow things down to like a point where they are out of things to do, but that's like you sit across green and you just cry. Like I think Trunks cannot like ever win against green.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And in a similar vein, I'm putting the next deck, which is Goku Black, also in C tier. I do think it
Yeah.
has, like, obviously it's Goku Black. It's got some high rolly cards, and I think it got a bunch of great new support in this set. It got a Zamasu, which searches for Goku Blacks, but we don't run enough Goku Blacks for that to consistently hit. We have a Goku Black that plays as Zamasu. Once again, don't play enough Zamasus for that to consistently hit. But the biggest thing for me is we have the 2-drop and the 4-drop new Zamasus, which are both meant to be sticky. However, they don't stick against red.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird. Like the new cards that Goku Blacks specifically got, right? They're actually like really good cards. Like they have inbuilt protection. They let you cycle whatever, right? But the problem is that like Red's mechanic of reducing battle cards to 0 and then they get like automatically removed off the board. Kind of like gets around these sticky like mechanics that Zamasu is trying to do. It was the exact same thing in the Masters version, right? It's like, oh, you have this card that like the keyword for it was indestructible in that game, right? And it's like, okay, my card can't be removed by steals, great. But because how the rules of the game work, once your battle card is reduced to 0 power, it's not removed by like an ability, it's removed by a game mechanic, so it bypasses that like unable to get removed condition, which is kind of unfortunate. But on top of that as well, Goku Black is also kind of like the casino deck, right? If you open the nuts, you can actually beat every deck in the game. But the problem is that you don't consistently open the nuts, and on top of that as well, it's like people know what Goku Black does now, so the surprise factor is not there. They know how to play around it. So I think it's hard to justify Goku Black being anything higher than C tier.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with that. Unfortunately, it is a fun deck to play, but it will stay low. Speaking of decks that will stay low, I'm going to have to put Ginyu in C tier.
I'll be real with you. I think the rest of the yellow deck, I reckon Ginyu and Cooler are both probably D tier. I think those are the two worst decks in the game
You
going into
think
set
they're
two.
D tier? This man's throwing some hate.
I'm just not throwing hate. It's just like, again, like what we touched about before with Frieza, right? It's like yellow's in this weird spot where it's like, it doesn't really, the tools it gained are good, but not in the meta, if that makes sense. It's like, the yellow decks will always do great into green, like now, right? But there's not really much reason to want to play Ginyu or Cooler over any other yellow deck. Like Cooler has that downside of being a crit leader, right? And then on top of that as well, it's yeah, it's the condition that you get to restand one of your cards once awakens. Like that's cool, but there's a lot more removal in the game now. So your cards that you're restanding, it'll be fresh out of hand, and then the restand will cost a lot more, right? Which is just kind of not very useful a lot of the time, right? And then with Ginyu too, it's like the Ginyu Force cards are like really cool. You get to spam 20Ks, but now the red got Android 17 that just gives you leader 5,000 power. Ginyu literally got phased out of the meta because Goldie's 25K, and now every red leader in the game is 25K. So I don't think there's literally no reason to play either of these decks, in my opinion.
Yep, no, to be honest, I guess I was trying to be a bit nice, but it's hard to argue with that. They are definitely in the wrong meta. I think both the leaders have a decent amount of potential. I think they both have some super cool effects, but I think in a format where every red deck's a 25k leader, we're not going to be able to see these decks thrive.
Yeah.
Additionally, these were the aggro decks, right? These were the decks that want to attack their leaders, and Top Coup is happy for you to attack. Like it wants those cards in hand. It wants the easy awaken. It wants to turn 3, use its effect to get a Kefla down. So definitely not the format for it. Moving on to both our favorite decks from set 1, the deck that we both played to win ourselves some Zero Gokus, Gohan. My
And Gohan,
Copium,
I love this deck.
my Copium wants to put it here. I don't know. If I can. I want it to be there.
I
I really want it to be there, but it's gonna be rough.
I wanted to be there too, but Gohan's weird. So Gohan actually got a lot of support. I think the best support card it got is that it got the new 3-drop Goku, which is just another ramp card, right? And the big thing about Green before is that for the only ramp card you had on 3 was Destructive Strength, and if you didn't see it, a lot of times you just lose your game on turn 3 as the Green player if you didn't see Destructive Strength, right? That was the most important card. And now that Gohan has essentially another destructive strength that you can run as 4, you can play up to 8 cards that ramp you on 3, and that's huge, right? That's like huge, but I don't think it's huge in this current meta where it's like again there's a lot of aggression going around. ramping on three isn't like, it's important for green. You have to do it, but it's like it's still a little bit too slow for my liking. On top of that too, Gohan being 20k, I think he's just got to get pushed out by top two. I think it's just yeah. Look, I think there's a world where you can actually probably still win with Gohan because Gohan's like you do get that free 15k every turn, and I think there will be a build that gets solved for Gohan in this set. But I think it's hard to put it in 80. It's definitely better than Broly and maybe better than Droids, but I think it's in B tier until it gets solved. Like its worst matchup was Ginyu last set, right? Well, you didn't like want to verse Frieza as Gohan because you just died to aggression, and now there's an even more aggressive deck, so it's kind of hard to push it on a higher point on the tier list when it just dies. It just dies too fast.
Yeah, it's definitely one that kind of needs to be ironed out a little bit. I think you've got like a couple of ways that Gohan can be built. You've obviously got a way which is like just ramp on three, slam the new Gohan future, 5 drop, and just like never swing at their leader, and just hope you drew your Kami to remove their Roshi, and for them to get to 3 life is like relatively difficult. So you're just kind of able to keep your Gohan alive and it KOs something at the end of every turn, or there's the way that you just need to draw 3 of your ramp cards and you ramp on 3, and then on turn 4 you ramp with Destructive Strength into ramping with Goku, so you have 7 energy. So by turn 5 you can slam a Broly, and I think Broly on turn 5 is going to be rough for any deck to deal with, even Top Coup. So I think Gohan has potential, but we may have to put the Copium on hold a little bit and leave it down to B tier.
Yeah, Copium will be back once it does well in an event this set. Let's trust.
Yeah, no, exactly. Speaking of another deck, which I personally think is in a super similar spot, I think it's Droids. I think Droids is kind of... I think most of these green decks are going to end up in B tier. Droids has, like, arguably one of the most interesting new cards to come out, which is the Android 1718. On play, you get rid of 2 of your energy, and then you bring back 3 energy in active mode. They all have to be androids that you bring back. To me, this is one of the most interesting cards. It allows you to do essentially what I was saying with Gohan, with like ramping, try to get to Broly on 5. Androids can get to Broly on 5. I think the most awkward thing for androids is the inherent want to run Jiro's Lab, because obviously that card's super good, but it only ramping once you hit turn 4 kind of turns me off it a little bit. But what do you think about the deck, John?
It's interesting. So Droids is a deck, one of the few decks I actually never played in set one, just because it's like I couldn't justify wanting to run Droids over Gohan or Broly. Granted, I do think Droids had a good matchup into both the green decks, just because it like would eventually out energy your opponent, and you can get to situations where you're able to drop a Broly and Android 16 and 17 in the same turn, which is huge, right? That's like a crazy big play. And it actually, like, not even just from the new 4-drop card you're talking about, it got heaps of support. I think a big one is that there's now an Android super combo, so that's actually really relevant for Jiro's Lab too. I just think it kind of falls into a similar boat as Gohan and Broly, right? Like, it doesn't do enough in terms of like mid game pressure. But I will say, I think there's a world where there is a world where someone figures out the Android deck, and I can see it being the best green deck in the game. But I can't see it right now because I haven't tinkered with it. I think the pieces are there. It has to get solved first, and I have to see it in action before I can believe it could be anything higher than B tier.
Yep, no, that definitely makes sense, and I guess we've talked about green for a while in a row, so let's just knock out the final green deck, which is Cell. Cell is a deck which, for me, is super hard to place. Obviously, the ramp with leader on 5 energy is so strong. Being able to use Cell 8-drop cells turn after turn is so strong. But to consistently do that, you're having to, on 3 energy, you're having to play a Destructive Strength, and then on 4 energy, you need to play your field. So you're not really playing any bodies on the field until 7 or 8 energy. So, John, where do you want me to play Cell? I know you've spent a lot more time thinking about the deck than I have. So this placement is all yours, buddy.
You giving it to me? All right, look, I think you'll disagree with me, but I actually think Cell's A tier. I think Cell's currently the best green deck, and that's literally just off the fact of like it's the only green leader that can if that can play back to back cells. Now, the cell Aatrox, like, okay, not only does it get to play back to back cells, but it's also the only green leader that can actually leave an energy up for gigantic meteor, right? Like, I personally cut down gigantic meteor in my Gohan deck to two just because the more I played Fusion World, the more I realized I'm tapping out like every turn this game to do stuff. I'm literally not leaving one energy up until like turn 5 or 6. And by then, if I draw four meteors in my hand, it feels kind of bad, right? So the fact that when you drop your Aatrox cell, or even when you're on six, when you with your lead ability, the fact that that energy comes in active mode, that's huge. That's your one energy full meteor, right? On top of that too, the Aatrox cell clearing two bodies and then also gaining a life means your cell leader is a bit more tankier. And the field cell is actually kind of just broken, right? It effectively turns your leader into either a draw two leader on your turn or a draw one ramp one leader, which yeah, it's just an upgraded version of Draw's Lab. And that card, like, once you get to the point where you don't need to drop cells anymore, or you don't think you're able to loop cells right efficiently, you actually just start just getting a big hand. Granted, I do think cells mid game is very, very weak, but if you're able to comfortably get to the late game, I think it's the yeah, I think just dropping back to back cells is actually very, very impressive. And another card that's underrated too is the Cell Junior in the deck, right? Like once Cell's out, you can play that for free and grab back any extra card from your drop area. And this is free, right? So like late game, if you just play Cell Junior, you can grab back a meteor, right? And you only Cell Junior. You effectively spent one energy to get a 40k swing, which is yeah, pretty good in my opinion. But yeah, I think right now in my eyes it is the best green leader because it's also the green leader that technically ramps the fastest because of its leader ability. But yeah, that's the way I think Cell's. I think it's like yeah, the Cell looping Cell is very very strong.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it is the card that kind of on paper reads like one of the strongest cards in the game. And just being able we now have like two 8 cost cards with both Cell and Broly. Even if you don't see the second Cell, you may have seen a Broly, which is definitely super strong. I definitely think Cell has the highest ceiling, but I also think it has a semi-low floor just because it doesn't play a card. I think you're gonna have to run cards like the 2-drop Trunks in the deck just to play early to try and get a bit of board. I think there's gonna have to be some sort of build out there where we're running a lot of low cost cards, no medium cost cards, and then a lot of high cost cards for the deck to work successfully. So I think it'll be cool to kind of figure out to see where the deck lands at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, like I think my favorite part about the Cell deck is that you actually get to play the Android 16 on turn four, or the 1718 on turn four. I think that's huge if you're getting aggro out. Like that to me is like the main reason to play the deck, which is like yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that is definitely very good. That card is super strong. Moving on, we've only got 2 decks left. Let's be really quick. With Zamasu, put it in D tier.
Worst. Yeah, I was gonna say DLC. I don't know. It's
I
weird. It's a 25k leader, so you think of Broly and you think of how good Broly was. I don't think it translates to Zamasu. Like one, Broly's in a weird spot is weird because you need to have low cards in hand, and then the Zamasu once it's awakened doesn't draw you cards. Yes, you gain a life, but it has that like the cost of you discard a card from your hand. So it's like
Yeah, you're not
yeah,
you're not drawing, and sure it's a 25k leader, but Blue's like you're not getting to your late game. Broly was getting to its late game with Broly because when it awakened, it ramped one, and it was green, so it was ramped. Blue's late game is Goku Black, and that's not enough in comparison to a Broly. I think maybe one day when Blue gets some better cards, this Zamasu may have a chance to be something. At the moment, I think it kind of sits in the D tier. Sits in the OPO 9. No, we're playing Fusion World, aren't we? Fusion World 09 waiting list. Just wait like 8 sets and maybe you'll get some support.
no, I don't think man. It will get support, but it's just like the fact that it just straight up doesn't draw, right? Like some people are gonna make the argument they're like, oh, but if you the card go into life as a draw, it's no, you just start the card from your hand, man. It's like come on.
Yeah,
I just like yeah, it's like and the fact as well, like the standard number for attacking in this current format is 25. It's like your 5k pump doesn't even mean anything.
yeah. I think that's probably the
It's
biggest
like
part.
yeah, it's like okay. like low key, I would say that this lead would be legit if it was a 30k, honestly. Because then I can justify not having any access to drawing and discarding card from your hand. But 25k is not it.
Yep, maybe we'll get a sense of being or something, like a real sense of being, like a master sense of being at some point, that will fix the deck up a little bit. But moving on, we have our last deck, which is Vegeta. Vegeta is a deck where, I'm going to say it, at some point it's going to get banned.
I
We've seen in
agree.
Masters how strong untapping effects are. One of the decks you used to play, Golden Frieza, it's got banned. SS3 Goku, which was a deck that untapped 3 energy, it's got banned as well. I think at some point this deck will be banned. I think at this point it doesn't have all the pieces it needs to be that A tier deck, that S tier deck, or that A tier deck. But for me, it's a super solid B tier deck.
I agree. I think between Frieza and if I reckon if Vegeta's B tier, I'd put Frieza in A tier then if Vegeta's B tier, right? Because I think Frieza outshines Vegeta a little bit right now, just because it gets more synergy with standing cards. But for Vegeta, right, I think the coolest part about the deck is that you technically currently get to run 8 super combos because there's that one extra card that it got, which is a 20k and a restands a card on defense only, right? So you get to run 8 super combos, sorry, which is that's cool, right? That's a cool thing. You can defend your cards easily and whatnot, right? But yeah, it's like it doesn't feel like it just has enough things right now to make it like that overwhelming deck. Like for Frieza, right, you want to play the same card, like you want to play Cooler, you want to play Golden Frieza, right? Well, Cooler blocker feels less good in Vegeta because you have to either not attack with it or attack with it on your turn, right? You don't get that free swing and restand with your leader. You just have to kind of like have a bit more like nuance, I guess, using that card. And then also with the Bulma one drop, right? Like that card's insane. You want to kind of be spamming that ability, but again, you can't really spam it like you can in Frieza. It doesn't restand itself. You have to do that little bit extra effort to get that extra value, which yeah, that kind of summarizes. Like you have to do a little bit extra to get a little bit of value, and it's just not enough now to climb for. But yeah, eventually, I think this is will get fine because it's like the restanding to energy just means that every card in the game and every extra card in the game that says activate roll, right, instantly becomes way better in the deck. Like even now, it's like what being able to have free death ball on your defensive turns that effectively stops 2 attacks. Having that card that is a super combo get and that restands a card, so that card can potentially be like 20 plus combo card, right? I think it's like it's got stuff going for it, but not enough stuff going for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's probably a bit like towards the lower end of the B tier. I do think it's one of those decks that's going to be really good at stalling out Topku. Same with Frieza. I think if it's built a bit more defensively, but I think all in all, it's yellow's just not eat this format, so I don't think we probably can move Frieza up. I think what we've got is a pretty decent depiction of what the format's going to look like. Do you think there's any last changes we need to make, John?
I think it's pretty spot on, honestly. Like looking at it, it's like the only like I said, the only change I'd maybe make is move Frieza up a tier, but it's kind of hard to say with how yellow is now. Yeah, like this that would be my tier list. I think that would be mine. I think everything else is pretty like yeah, I think everything else is fair. Like, there's nothing too crazy right now. Granted, we are in the first week, so some people are still discovering builds. Like, I think that 2 decks that are probably going to start up in popularity once they get solved is the Android 17 and 18. I think that's one deck that could definitely get solved and like just jump up in popularity. And then also Zamasu, which is like it's kind of hard to stray away from the top tier leader, but for Zamasu, like I said before, there is that one drop freezer that I got, so that's essentially a 1 OG 25k. Who knows? It might actually have a really good matchup into Top Crew just because the difference between Top Crew and Zoroku is that Top Crew has to discard cards from the sun to keep up the aggression, whereas Zoroku doesn't. You can play a 1 drop for 1 drop freeze 25k swing. But that's all like up in the air. How the meta evolves. I think overall this is pretty good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm pretty happy with kind of where we've got at the list. I think we're going to get a couple side eyes for leaving that Vegeta in A tier, but I respect it. I do definitely think that for me the flex spots is whether or not we can kind of get Gohan to have a decent TOP matchup, whether Cell being not playing like any cards realistically until it gets to 6 energy, whether that's going to hurt it too much, and kind of just how we end up building Frieza are probably like the biggest biggest flex points, but I do definitely think for anyone at home kind of deciding which deck to pick up, this is going to be a pretty accurate representation of what the decks look like in this format.
Yeah, I agree to that. I agree.
All right, cool. Well, John, thank you so much for helping me out with this tier list. So, any shout outs you would like to give?
Not a shout out to the boys I always play with, like you know who they are, Benny, Kevin, John, my manager Jess. That's yeah, that's it. I guess I can't think of anyone else. Collectors Company, all the good stuff.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming along, guys. If you have enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know down in the comment section what you would like to see in future videos. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.